Part 1. Heir of the Seriviver. In Chapter 1, on the city wall, King Elend Venture observes an approaching army of 50,000 troops led by his father Straff Venture. With only 20,000 poorly trained soldiers, Elend feels the threat of economic disaster and contemplates a proposal for the assembly to avoid rash actions. Meanwhile, Vin moves through Luthadel at night, enhancing her senses with allomancy. She reflects on her past and uses steel to detect nearby metal sources. Vin meets Orsur the Khandra and expresses disappointment at not encountering her elusive follower. They decide to return to Elend, who is likely concerned about her absence. In Chapter 2, Vin immediately reacted, fleeing as assassins emerged from the mists. Using her allomantic powers, she deflected coins aimed at her and prepared for an attack. Despite being outnumbered by 8 enemies, Vin engaged in combat, using her agility and skills to take down several thugs and coin shots. During the fight, she realized a hidden Mistborn was among the attackers, prompting her to burn Adium for an advantage. After a fierce battle, Vin emerged victorious but wounded, while a mysterious figure watched from a rooftop. In Chapter 3, Elend faces difficulties leading the Parliamentary Council, aiming to remind the Assembly of the threat posed by King Straff Venture and recent assassination attempts to garner support. Meanwhile, Vin, recovering from a confrontation with assassins, keeps watch over Elend from the palace rooftop, anxious about the dangers he faces, particularly from a lurking Mistborn. During her vigil, she senses an unknown presence and reacts by pushing coins at a shadowy figure that disappears into the mist, leaving her unsettled. Ham informs them that the attackers are likely from the Western Dominance, hinting at Ashweather Kett's involvement. In Chapter 4, Sazed discovers a dead body in the Eastern Dominance, identified as a farmer named Jed. The villagers are fearful and report that he died alone, twisting in the mist. Sazed examines the corpse, noting its condition and recalling diseases that could cause such spasms. He digs a grave, tapping into his pewter mind for strength, and performs a Hada funeral ritual, which intrigues the villagers but also highlights their despair. Sazed expresses hope for their future despite their struggles, and after completing the burial, he shifts focus to teaching them practical skills rather than religious beliefs. In Chapter 5, Vin senses the anxiety in Luthadel as the city prepares for potential conflict, despite many ska remaining due to Elend's declaration of freedom. She reflects on her identity and struggles with feelings of disconnect from nobility. Overwhelmed by a crowd seeking her guidance, she retreats and decides to acquire a wolfhound for Orsur to use as a disguise. Vin finds Elend and Doxon discussing an imminent army threat, prompting a conversation about her safety. Though she expresses distrust of Orsur, they bond over their feelings for Kelsier, and Vin resolves to experiment with a new aluminum alloy to enhance her allomancy. In Chapter 6, Elend observes Vin and Ham sparring in the palace courtyard. He wishes to join, but feels inadequate against potential allomancer assassins. Vin, despite her smaller size, impressively holds her own against Ham. Clubs, a gruff military leader, expresses skepticism about their army's readiness for an impending attack by Straff Venture. Elend learns from Spook, who has returned from reconnaissance, that rumors about the Lord Ruler's Adium in Luthadel are resurging, possibly orchestrated to distract warlords. After a fierce sparring session, Vin wins against Ham, showcasing her agility and strength. Later, Vin finds a Khandra replica of her wolfhound in her room. In Chapter 7, Sazed teaches a group of rural ska children to write on dirt floors, reflecting on their impoverished living conditions and lack of resources. Despite his efforts to educate them, Sazed feels their lack of passion and realizes they are merely obeying orders. He grapples with the aftermath of the Lord Ruler's death, feeling a sense of unfulfilled duty and concern about their ongoing danger. Suddenly, he is approached by Marsh, a Steel Inquisitor, who informs him that the conventicle of Saren is empty and urges Sazed to accompany him. Sazed hesitates, but ultimately agrees to inform the villagers before leaving. In Chapter 8, Vin practices her Mistborn abilities in Luthadel, utilizing steel and pewter to navigate the rooftops. She reflects on her past with Kelsier while training and meets Orsur, who follows her through the city. They discuss protection and Vin's growing responsibilities, contrasting her previous life of hunger. Vin notes the fortified city wall and the threats Elend's kingdom faces, particularly from Straff Venture. She encounters the Watcher and engages in a chase, during which she accidentally burns tin and duralumin, amplifying her senses but exhausting her reserves. The Watcher escapes, prompting Vin to contemplate his identity and motives. In Chapter 9, Sazed observes changes in Marsh, who has become blunter and more isolated after his transformation into an Inquisitor. As they walk together, Marsh insists that Sazed should return to Luthadel, emphasizing the importance of events there. Sazed argues that the rest of the Final Empire also needs him, but Marsh dismisses this, highlighting that Luthadel's situation is crucial. Sazed reflects on his vow to protect Vin, recognizing her growing strength in Allomancy. Though hesitant, he acknowledges that he must return to Luthadel, grappling with his motivations and the potential dangers ahead. In Chapter 10, Elend addresses the Assembly in a modest hall, seeking their support to delay any decisions regarding a looming threat from Strafventure's army. Vin, seated with Ham, worries about the Obligator's reactions to Elend's speech and questions his decision to keep them in power. Tensions rise as assemblymen debate Elend's proposal for a meeting with Straf, with various factions arguing over strategy and power. Ultimately, they agree to give Elend time to negotiate. As the meeting adjourns, a soldier interrupts to report the arrival of a second army outside the city, escalating the situation further. In Chapter 11, Elend surveys 2 invading armies from Luthadel's wall, feeling powerless against the threat. Vin, using her allomancy, leaps off the wall to save Breeze from pursuing archers, manipulating metal to slow her fall and divert arrows. They reach the city gates, where Breeze praises Vin's dramatic rescue. The group discusses the armies, and Breeze reveals he deliberately brought Lord Set's forces to create a standoff. Tension escalates when a guard informs Elend about 2 skeletons found in the palace, indicating a possible Khandra infiltration, suggesting someone close to them might be an imposter. Part 2. Ghosts in the Mist. In Chapter 12, Sazed and Marsh approach the conventicle of Saren, a fortress situated in a misty crater, designed for solitude rather than defense. Marsh suspects the Inquisitors have departed, prompting Sazed to enhance his vision and reduce his weight for a controlled descent into the chasm. Upon entering the conventicle, Sazed begins documenting their stark surroundings, despite Marsh's disdain for the Inquisitors. They discover the slaughtered bodies of servants, prompting Marsh to investigate further alone. Sazed explores a dark area, finding a torture chamber and an ancient steel plate inscribed with writings by Quan, sparking his determination to preserve this knowledge. In Chapter 13, Vin connects the anticipation to Alendi but faces scorn from the Worldbringers. She suspects a Khandra imposter may have infiltrated the palace, believing a staff member was killed to make way for the Khandra. Vin realizes that Khandra cannot be affected by mental allomancy, which could help identify the imposter. Meanwhile, Elend prepares for a meeting with his crew, who discuss forming an alliance with either Lord Set or Strafventure to avoid starvation during the siege of Luthadel. They agree on a risky plan to play both sides against each other. A Terrace woman then seeks a private audience with Elend. In Chapter 14, a Terrace woman named Tindwyl confronts Elend, emphasizing his lack of authority as king and offering to teach him about leadership. She stresses the importance of commanding respect and presents herself as his instructor, indicating she has knowledge from studying biographies of leaders. Meanwhile, Vin returns to find Elend distracted and shares her concerns about the deepness and the implications of the Lord Ruler's actions. They discuss strategies to identify a Khandra imposter among the palace staff, with Vin determined to test Spook and Ham. The chapter ends with Vin resolving to confront the lurking mysteries of the night. In Chapter 15, Sazed wakes alone in a desolate landscape, noting the absence of his companion Marsh. Feeling urgency to reunite with Vin and Elend in Luthadel, Sazed decides to visit the nearby village of Urbana for news. As he approaches, he senses an unsettling stillness and discovers the village overrun with corpses, all dead from starvation and dehydration. Inside one hovel, he finds a living man who reveals that a mysterious mist has kept the villagers confined for weeks, leading to their demise. Sazed helps the man outside, contemplating the grim situation and the ominous implications of the mist. In Chapter 16, Vin examines the Lord Ruler's logbook, noting mentions of a misspirit and deepness, highlighting potential threats. Meanwhile, Elend observes the siege of Luthadel as armies attempt to weaken him through starvation and disease. Clubs advises Elend on the need for decisive leadership. Tindwyl arrives to prepare Elend for his role as king, emphasizing the importance of military attire and confidence, even if he feels unprepared. After a makeover, Elend embraces his new identity and plans for discreet combat training. A messenger from Elend's father arrives, prompting him to seek out Vin for further discussions. In Chapter 17, Vin hesitates to take notes on the Hero of Ages prophecies. Elend surprises her with a regal appearance, and they discuss a messenger from Elend's father, who is revealed to be Zane, a Mistborn. Zane proposes an alliance, urging Elend to meet his father at the Venture Camp due to threats from assassins. Vin remains cautious of Zane, reflecting on their past encounters. As the chapter concludes, she and Orsur remain vigilant for potential dangers, deepening Vin's sense of foreboding about a confrontation with Zane and her identity in relation to her powers and loyalties. In Chapter 18, Zane observes Elend from the mists and feels a conflicted hatred toward him, stemming from both jealousy and brotherhood. He retrieves a message from a spy within Elend's palace and heads to the Venture army camp, dismissing guards with authority. Zane is tormented by whispers from a voice urging him to kill, which he struggles to ignore. He meets his father, Straff, who questions Zane about his interactions with Elend and Vin. Zane grapples with his insanity and the pressure to prove himself while concealing his own strength and plans. Straff, suspecting poison, calls for an antidote from his herbalist Amaranta. In Chapter 19, Sazed discards an empty steel mine bracelet after 5 months of travel and feels anxious about reaching Luthadel. He discovers an army of Koloss blocking his path and climbs a tree for a better view, recalling their violent nature. While attempting to escape, he's caught by a Koloss patrol led by a massive creature. Sazed witnesses a violent confrontation among the Koloss, confirming their brutality. Captured, he meets Jastas Lakal, who claims to control the Koloss and seeks an alliance with Elend Venture to conquer Luthadel. Sazed negotiates his freedom and agrees to deliver Jasti's message to Elend. In Chapter 20, Elend prepares to confront his father, Straff Venture, believing it is crucial amid the impending siege. He confidently discusses strategies with his crew, asserting his ability to manipulate Straff and positioning himself as an ally, despite concerns from Ham and Doxon about entering enemy territory unguarded. Elend plans to bring Vin for leverage, while she struggles with her feelings about his transformation and evaluates her crew for signs of betrayal. She senses Breeze's influence on Elend's confidence, prompting her to reassess her suspicions. Ultimately, Elend commits to meeting Straff, marking his deeper involvement in the political landscape. In Chapter 21, Elend encounters Alrian Set, the daughter of Lord Set, who seeks asylum, escaping her father's manipulative nature in his war camp. She reveals crucial information about her father's supply sources, which could aid Elend. Breeze, embarrassed by her affection, sits uncomfortably while Elend attempts to manage the situation. After humorous banter among the crew, they debate Alrian's status. She could serve as a bargaining chip or potential hostage. Ultimately, Elend decides she can stay temporarily to distract Set's army, signaling his growing confidence in leadership and commitment to navigate the political landscape. In Chapter 22, Vin grapples with her fears of protecting Elend and the kingdom amid chaotic mists. She stealthily follows Ham, who checks guards at Keep Venture, and they discuss the need to identify an imposter among the palace staff. Vin admits she's out of adium, expressing concern about facing a Mistborn without it, while Ham advises her on the importance of surprise. Later, she converses with Orsur, reflecting on their shared experiences of mistreatment and trust issues, deepening their bond. The chapter concludes with Vin sensing allomantic pulses, leading to the revelation of Sazed, who brings troubling news. In Chapter 23, Sazed informs Elend that King Lakal commands 20,000 Koloss, posing a significant threat, especially since the Koloss could attack either army besieging Luthadel. He also shares troubling news about the mists, which have started killing people during the day after the Lord Ruler's death. The group debates the dangers posed by the mists and the Koloss, heightening Elend's anxiety. Meanwhile, Vin expresses distrust of Miss Alrian, noticing her disheveled appearance, suggesting she was eavesdropping. Sazed reflects on his exhaustion and confronts Tindwyl about neglecting his duties, insisting on investigating the mist despite her objections. In Chapter 24, Vin reflects on the dangers associated with the mist and Sazed's findings. While sitting atop Keep Venture, she senses something ominous in the mist and hears strange thumping sounds that no one else seems to notice. Zane, searching for her, arrives, but initially expresses reluctance to engage in combat. He questions Vin about her power and its constraints, suggesting she is still subservient to Elend's will. Vin asserts her desire to protect Elend and acknowledges her instincts to kill their enemies. Zane acknowledges her strength, but implies they are both trapped by their circumstances. Ultimately, he leaves, and Vin resumes her vigil. In Chapter 25, Vin wakes up and prepares for a shopping trip with Tindwyl, who encourages her to buy a dress for a meeting with Straff Venture. As they explore the market, Vin notices the siege's effects on the city. Alrian, a noblewoman, discusses fashion, while Vin struggles with her identity and the significance of wearing noble attire. Tindwyl probes Vin about her relationship with Elend, prompting her to confront her fears. When Vin dons a beautiful gown, she feels a renewed sense of femininity. However, chaos erupts as an army attacks, compelling her to prepare for battle, but Club stops her. In Chapter 26, Vin prepares for a meeting with Straff Venture, wearing a luxurious blue dress designed for mobility. Reflecting on recent attacks aimed at instilling fear in Luthadel, she resolves to support Elend's decision to confront his father, recognizing its strategic importance. As they travel in a carriage sent by Straff, Elend admires Vin's transformation, while they discuss the political landscape and Straff's ruthlessness. Vin advises Elend to appear weak, allowing Straff to feel in control. Upon reaching Straff's camp, Elend confronts his father's manipulative nature, while Vin fabricates information about their adium to reduce Straff's threat. In Chapter 27, Elend confronts his father, Straff Venture, at dinner, where Straff reveals plans to execute him while claiming they have a treaty against Tet. Elend warns of an approaching Koloss army and proposes an alliance, but Straff threatens him instead. Tension rises as Elend realizes his father's intent to kill him, while Vin, hidden in the shadows, prepares to intervene. Zane questions Vin about her relationship with Elend, revealing his scars from the pits of Hathsin. Straff decides to delay an attack on Luthadel until Vin is eliminated, ordering Zane to kill her. Elend learns from the assembly that he has been deposed, shocking him. Part 3, King. In Chapter 28, Elend faces criticism from Tindwyl and his allies for a legal clause that allows the assembly to depose him. He defends this decision, aiming to establish a responsible monarchy. As they strategize, Elend refuses to use force against the assembly, believing their actions may be a ploy by invaders, possibly orchestrated by Straff or Ket, to undermine his authority. Tindwyl informs Elend that Sazed cannot assist with political matters. Elend also worries about Vin's mood, and Tindwyl explains her insecurities, advising Elend to prioritize his responsibilities as king over his feelings for her. In Chapter 29, Vin reflects on her insomnia and the looming threat of Straff's army while waiting for Zane, who has not appeared. Orsur expresses concern about her fixation on Zane, prompting Vin to justify her vigilance, insisting he is her enemy. As they converse, Vin acknowledges Elend's struggles with the assembly and his steadfast commitment to lawful governance despite failures. While contemplating Elend's noble approach, she considers how different their worlds are. Ultimately, Vin gains insight into the nature of the deepness, revealing a potential breakthrough in understanding the threat they face. In Chapter 30, Sazed expresses his fears regarding Elendi's potential return from the Well of Ascension, recalling their first meeting and his belief in Elendi as the hero of ages, despite skepticism from other Worldbringers. He discovers doubts about his position in a document by Quan. Vin enters and discusses the deepness, suggesting it might be related to the mists, which have started killing people. She shares her notes and her feeling of being watched. They ponder the mist danger and the imminent return of the hero of ages, while Sazed reflects on Tindwyl's difficult past as a breeder. The chapter concludes with Vin choosing to rest while Sazed continues his work. In Chapter 31, Phelan Frandu feels superior as a merchant among Ska, awaiting King Elend Venture's arrival. When Elend arrives with his Allomancers, he asserts his leadership by nominating Lord Penrod as Chancellor to restore order and reassure the Assembly about Luthadel's safety. Elend emphasizes that his father, Straff Venture, will not attack the city, citing his fear of Vin, the most powerful Mistborn. As discussions on leadership unfold, Penrod nominates Ellen for king. However, Phylon surprises everyone by nominating Lord Set, posing a significant threat to Ellen's claim to the throne and creating tension within the assembly. In Chapter 32, Vin observes Ket entering the assembly with a protective group of soldiers, signaling his bold strategy amidst the siege. Ket asserts his power, stating he has an army ready to take Luthadel and challenges Ellen's leadership. He offers the assembly a deal: elect him as king to ensure peace and stability, emphasizing his strength compared to Straff's threat. Despite initial resistance, a vote allows Ket to bring in troops. Ellen struggles with the assembly's decision, realizing the fear of chaos drives their choice. Ket's son, Naorndin, approaches Ellen to arrange a meeting, leading to Ellen reluctantly agreeing to discuss terms. In Chapter 33, Vin reflects on her significance in finding Elendi in the ambiguous prophecies regarding the Hero of Ages and the return of the Deepness. Meanwhile, Ellen investigates illnesses in the city linked to a poisoned well, suspecting sabotage from Lord Ket or his father. After dinner, Vin and Orser search for Doxon in the palace library, noting his changed demeanor since Kelsier's death, which signals shifts in crew dynamics. During their conversation, Doxon expresses guilt over his violent past, and Vin wrestles with suspicions of him being a Khandra imposter, leading her to consider Captain Demu as a potential threat. In Chapter 34, Ellen confronts political challenges regarding Lord Set's influence in Luthadel, realizing Set's political acumen could disrupt his stability goals. Vin informs the group of illnesses caused by poisoned wells, which Ellen is already aware of. Tindwyl's disrespect towards Sazed prompts Ellen to defend him, leading to Tindwyl leaving the meeting. Meanwhile, Vin's reflections reveal her insecurities about Ellen's growing independence. Later, she meets Zane, who discloses his identity as Ellen's brother and warns her about an approaching Koloss army. He offers her the chance to leave Ellen, hinting at potential betrayal, leaving Vin conflicted. In Chapter 35, Vin prepares for an important dinner with Ellen, reflecting on her identity and receiving reassurance from Tindwyl about Ellen's growth as a leader. Ellen approaches Lord Ket's keep with soldiers, cautious of potential threats. During the meal, Set greets them casually and engages in a tense discussion with Ellen about power and governance. Set reveals he chased away Breeze and hints at intentions to eliminate Ellen and dissolve the assembly if he gains the throne. Ellen defends the assembly, emphasizing the importance of giving power to the people, while Ket offers food in exchange for loyalty, which Ellen firmly rejects. In Chapter 36, Sazed reflects on the suffering of Luthadel's refugees and cares for a sick child. Tindwyl arrives to share a discovery, uplifting his spirits. Breeze uses his soothing abilities to ease the refugees' pain while Ellen addresses rising clothing prices, directing Ham to confront greedy merchants. Breeze and Clubs discuss their doubts about their roles in Ellen's kingdom. Breeze wonders about the authenticity of love influenced by his powers. Alrianne reveals she has been rioting Breeze's emotions. Meanwhile, Vin suspects Captain Demu of being a spy and discovers him rallying Ska with hope in the survivor's teachings, leading to a confrontation. In Chapter 37, Sazed and Tindwyl discover a passage about King Wennigan who blamed food shortages on the Deepness, which Tindwyl believes is missed. They agree on this interpretation, and Tindwyl plans to visit opposing armies to share knowledge. Meanwhile, Ellen walks the city wall with Ham, reflecting on his desire to be king and protect the people. He acknowledges that to regain his throne, he must embrace his strengths as a scholar and an idealist who cares for the Ska. Ellen resolves not to abandon them, concluding the chapter with the beginnings of a new idea. In Chapter 38, Ellen prepares for the assembly vote to become king, aiming to leverage his reputation and the Church of the Survivor for support. During his speech, an attacker disrupts the proceedings, leading to chaos in the assembly hall. Vin intervenes, fighting off armed assassins using her allomancy and combat skills, sustaining injuries while protecting Ellen. Ellen struggles to find a weapon and defend himself. Vin ultimately defeats the last attacker, shocking Ellen with her brutality. After the skirmish, Ham reassures Ellen about Vin's condition as they discuss the shifting allegiances and the upcoming vote for leadership. Part 4. Knives. In Chapter 39, Straff Venture rides through the mist with his son Zane and 50 soldiers, feeling exposed after Zane's reckless plan led to the loss of valuable allomancers. Tensions rise as Straff expresses frustration over the failed assassination attempt on Elend and Vin. First and Penrod arrives to discuss a power transfer and the atium hidden in the city, which Straff intends to reclaim. As they speak, Straff feels the effects of a poison Zane has likely administered. He rushes back to camp for an antidote from Amaranta, realizing that Zane has become too dangerous to keep alive. In Chapter 40, Vin grapples with the idea that they may have created a hero to fit prophecies. As she recovers, Elend offers her comfort and discusses recent political changes, including Penrod's ascension to king, which he attributes to his overconfidence in the assembly. Zane visits Vin and reveals that Ket likely orchestrated the assassination attempt against Elend and Penrod. He gifts Vin a nugget of atium for her protection, expressing his concern for her safety. The chapter underscores shifting allegiances and the repercussions of their past decisions, highlighting the complexities of their relationships and the political landscape. In Chapter 41, Sazed and Tindwyl analyze a logbook attributed to Alendi, who fears for his safety upon returning from the Well of Ascension. They discuss Alendi's complex relationship with Quan, a Terris scholar who once viewed him as the hero of ages, but later opposed him, fearing Alendi's rise to power. Quan sent his nephew Rashek to thwart Alendi. Meanwhile, Ellen Venture reflects on his kingship failures, feeling he could have done more for Luthadel's citizens as the threat of the Kolos army looms. He resolves to embrace his identity and support the Survivor Rally, seeking a renewed purpose. In Chapter 42, Ellen Venture collaborates with Captain Demu to relocate Ska families to suitable tenements and gather firewood for Luthadel's needy as cold weather approaches. Amid reports of sabotage and sightings of an Inquisitor, he orders increased patrols. Elend reflects on his precarious position and forms a tenuous alliance with Ket against Straff. Exiting the city with Ham, Elend is determined to confront Jastas within the Kolos camp. Upon meeting Jastas, he is confronted with his friend's transformation into a tyrant. After a fierce struggle, Elend learns that Jastas controls the Kolos by paying them. In Chapter 43, Vin feels powerless in Elend's room, but learns from Orsur that Elend is alone at the Kolos camp. Zane warns her of a traitor named Demo who has betrayed them to Ket. Concerned for Elend's safety, Vin resolves to take action and retrieves atium for a confrontation. Wellen, a soldier, senses danger in the mists as Vin and Zane stealthily attack Keep Hasting, taking out guards and haze killers. Vin demonstrates her allomancy, launching bodies into the night. Upon confronting Ket and his son, Neorndin, Ket admits his failures and lack of allomancers before Zane arrives, dismissing Vin's pleas. In Chapter 44, Breeze observes Ket's army retreating and learns from Clubs that Straff will allow the Kolos to attack Luthadel. In Ellen's study, he and Ham discuss Vin's unexpected attack on Tet, pondering her mental state. Spook reveals that Kolos are changing, leading Ellen to suspect they may be more intelligent than previously thought. Meanwhile, Orsur finds Vin hiding in a thieving hideout. She reflects on her violent past and expresses guilt over her actions. Ellen reassures her and supports her decision to leave Luthadel for Terris. They discuss the potential threat of another Mistborn, Zane, in the city. In Chapter 45, Tindwyl informs Sazed about a prophecy linking the Hero of Ages to the Rabzine, emphasizing its significance. While Sazed sees prophecies as a source of hope, Tindwyl remains skeptical. Their research is interrupted by the discovery that crucial parts have been torn, including a warning about Alendi and the Well of Ascension. Vin arrives seeking advice on her feelings for Elend, and Sazed advises her to let love be mutual and respect Elend's choices. Meanwhile, Elend expresses doubt about their relationship. Sazed resolves to ensure both Vin and Elend escape Luthadel before it faces disaster. In Chapter 46, Breeze receives a secretive letter from Sazed and decides to meet him, sensing a conspiracy. At their meeting with Clubs and Ham, they discuss the threat from Straff's armies and whether to abandon Luthadel. Doxson questions Elendot's leadership, but Sazed emphasizes the importance of their fight for the Ska, highlighting the need for sacrifices. Breeze volunteers to leave the city to organize resistance, focusing on Vin's role. They plan to convince Vin to escape with Elend while others stay to fight, agreeing to send Tindwyl and Lord Lestiborns to assist in rallying the Ska. In Chapter 47, Vin reflects on her power and failures while sitting on her balcony. Zane urges her to leave Elend, claiming he doesn't understand her, but Vin chooses to stay. affirming Elend's trust in her. Zane's anger erupts into violence as he attacks, revealing his manipulation of Orsur, who is a spy. In a desperate confrontation, Vin realizes she must defend herself against Zane, who no longer considers her an ally. As their fight escalates, Vin ultimately stabs Zane in the neck, and he confesses his trust in her before dying, leaving her wounded and uncertain about the future. In Chapter 48, Elend writes a letter to Jastas about the Kolos situation when Vin bursts in, covered in blood and crying, revealing she killed Zane, Elend's brother. After tending to her injuries with Sazed's help, they decide to marry immediately with Sazed as their witness. Vin insists on going to the Well of Ascension, and Elend agrees to accompany her to secure it against Straf's threat. Sazed reveals the well's location, suggesting that releasing its power could defeat the deepness and destroy the Kolos. They consider taking Spook for scouting as they prepare for their journey. Part 5. Snow and Ash. In Chapter 49, Tindwyl argues with Elend, urging him to stay and protect Luthadel, but he insists on leaving for Terrace with Vin, trusting her despite her Messiah delusions. After she departs, Vin shares her concern about seeing a spirit in the mists. Joined by Alrian, they prepare to leave, and Vin uses her powers to create chaos among the soldiers pursuing them. As they ride out, Elend reassures Vin about their escape, but uncertainty about their future looms. Meanwhile, Straf Venture confronts his mistress Amaranta, realizing her betrayal, and in a fit of rage, he strangles her before losing consciousness. In Chapter 50, Alrian manipulates a group of thugs led by Hobart to return to her father's army. She arrives at the camp and persuades the soldiers to accept the bandits by promising rewards. Reuniting with her father Lord Set, they argue about strategy, with Alrian insisting they must return to Luthadel to forge alliances. Meanwhile, Elend, Vin, and Spook travel safely, with Vin gathering firewood as Spook shares his insecurities. Straf, after learning of his army's retreat, decides to withdraw further. Sazed, preparing for conflict, discusses military plans with Tindwyl and is assigned to Steelgate. In Chapter 51, Vin notices unusual mists in the morning, feeling a connection to the deepness. She confronts a mist spirit in their tent, but it vanishes. Vin reassures Elend upon his awakening and learns from Spook that 5 men, likely Straf's scouts, are following them. As they prepare breakfast, Vin expresses her determination to act decisively. Sazed helps Spook join the crew on the wall, where they learn the Kolos are fighting among themselves. Chaos ensues as the Kolos advance on Luthadel. Elend executes Jastas Lakal for his betrayal, and Vin senses the Well of Ascension is south, prompting her departure for Luthadel. In Chapter 52, Breeze attempts to calm soldiers at Zinc Gate using his soothing abilities, but anxiety rises as they anticipate a Kolos attack. Clubs joins him, discussing the fear permeating the men. Vin races toward Luthadel, angry at having to leave her friends and recalling Kelsier's lessons on trust. The chapter reveals that the eastern Zinc Gate has been breached, escalating the chaos. Sazed recognizes the urgency of the situation and sends a message to Lord Dockson about their commander's incompetence. As panic spreads, he confronts civilians reluctant to leave, steels himself with pewter, and prepares to face the Kolos. Meanwhile, Vin seeks pewter to enhance her strength for the fight ahead. In Chapter 53, Rashek feels betrayed by Alendi as he expresses his hatred for the hero of ages. Straf's army approaches Luthadel, bolstered by the drug Black Frayne, while reports confirm the Kolos have breached multiple gates. Straf chooses to delay his attack, expecting the Kolos to weaken soon. Sazed fights a Kolos at the gate, using pewter for strength, but finds himself overwhelmed as reinforcements fail to arrive. As the situation worsens and the Kolos continue their assault, Sazed prepares for another wave of attack, leading the remaining soldiers in a desperate defense against the chaos engulfing the city. In Chapter 54, Alendi seeks guides through the Terrace Mountains, while Vin fights off invading Kolos and Luthadel, feeling fatigued but determined to defend the helpless. Sazed learns from a messenger that Keep Venture has fallen and urges Lord Penrod to evacuate the citizens, but Penrod refuses. Amidst the battle, Vin senses the well's power nearby and resolves to find it to aid Elend's people. She battles the Kolos, realizing they may share a weakness with Kandra, enabling her to connect with them mentally. Sazed, overwhelmed by despair, discovers Tindwyl's frozen body, questioning the value of his religious knowledge. In Chapter 55, Rashek seeks to mislead Elendi's quest while Straff awakens, eager to seize Luthadel. He discovers the Koloss are alive and believes they are weakening. Unexpectedly, Vin attacks and kills Straff with a duralumin-fueled steel jump, sparking chaos. Ket decides to support Vin against Straff's forces, and as they engage, Sazed reflects on Tindwyl's death and his potential leadership. With Ket's help, Straff's troops falter. Vin, bloodied but victorious, captures Lord Jennarl, who swears loyalty to Ellen Venture. Vin asks Sazed for assistance in securing Luthadel before pushing herself into the sky, leaving Sazed to oversee the new order. Part 6. Words in Steel. In Chapter 56, Ellen travels through the mist toward Luthadel, reflecting on his achievements despite lacking allomancy. He meets Spook, who warns him about an approaching mistwraith but reassures him of its harmlessness. Spook spots watchfires ahead, indicating a possible army presence, prompting Ellen to wait cautiously. They encounter refugees from Terrace who share that Steel Inquisitors attacked, capturing or killing the Keepers. They express hope in King Venture's leadership, while Elend worries about Luthadel's fate. Despite concerns about the Koloss and the Deepness, Elend remains optimistic that Vin will find a way to stop them and believes they can rebuild. In Chapter 57, Ket pushes for military action to reclaim his country, but Sazed and other leaders advocate for caution, agreeing to send scouts instead. Sazed grapples with apathy following Tindwyl's death, aiming to keep the focus on Vin's power. Elend and Spook return to Luthadel, observing the aftermath of destruction, but relieved to see Elend's flag. Vin awakens and feels the Well of Ascension nearby, believing it may be hidden within the city. She urges Sazed to trust her instincts as they move towards Credit Shaw, where they prepare to explore the depths of the Lord Ruler's palace. In Chapter 58, Elend and Vin navigate a cavern filled with dark smoke, moving toward the mysterious Well of Ascension. Meanwhile, Sazed faces Marsh, who has become an Inquisitor and suffers severe injuries during their confrontation. Sazed discovers he can tap into the powers of metal mines embedded within him, enabling him to recover and fight back against Marsh. As Elend and Vin reach the glowing pool, Elend is attacked by a mist spirit and gravely injured. Vin, desperate to save him, approaches the well, experiencing its immense power. Ultimately, she chooses to relinquish this power, understanding Elend's true desires for peace over her own need to save him. The cavern shakes violently as Vin's decision reverberates through the space. In Chapter 59, Vin mourns as Elend takes his last breaths after a disastrous event. Overwhelmed by despair and guilt for her perceived betrayal, she feels empty and uncertain about her life without him. A mist spirit appears, pointing urgently at a broken piece of pottery, revealing a nugget of metal inside. As Elend weakens, Vin realizes she must get him to swallow the metal to save him. Despite her initial hesitation, she feeds it to him with a liquid from her vial. Miraculously, color returns to Elend's face as Vin senses he is burning pewter, indicating he may still be alive. Epilogue. Sazed arrives at the conventicle of Seren, troubled by Tindwyl's death and the ongoing, unpredictable deaths caused by the mists. He discovers discrepancies between his rubbing of Quan's words and the original steel plate, revealing that the prophecies have been manipulated. Realizing that the religion he studied is a lie, he concludes that a nefarious force is guiding Elendi toward the Well of Ascension, intending to unleash a powerful threat. Meanwhile, Vin and Elend discuss the aftermath of her actions, which freed something terrible. They resolve to survive and confront the challenges ahead together,